Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Phil, here we are. It's February already. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but as this goes out Saturday morning, it's the 1st of February.
Yeah, I think everyone will be thinking the same. I think a lot of our conversations have been, well, do we say Happy New Year still? Or have we got until the end of January to say it? And then you go, well, actually, don't leave you long because we are nearly at the end of Jan. And that's it. It's gone. Finished. For our 1st of Jan, we are officially in the month of February. But you say it's flying by. As we might say. So, yeah, it's and the industry isn't slowing down yet, is it?
No, absolutely no sign of it. And just pulling together the headlines for today's pod, there's so much going on in the sector at the moment. So very much a case of trying to cherry pick the most relevant, the most important, the most exciting stories, which hopefully we've done.
Yeah, hopefully. I know that there's been a bit of activity in the last few days of January, because obviously January is a key month to start the year off, and I think there was a lot of vehicles overflow from last year into this year. So yeah, it'll be interesting when we get to speak in a week or so about the new car performance as we kick off the new year and who's doing what and which vehicles being registered. But we'll talk about that one another time. But to kick off today, obviously we've got our monthly catch up with CAP HPI, and we had the pleasure of being joined again by Jeremy Yea, who shared what's been happening in the month of January around used car trade values as we enter February. We will be playing a clip of that shortly, just a little snippet. But as always, we do always advise you to listen to the full interview and look at the editorial, because that's really where the detail is. And we say it every time, devil's in the detail, but you all know listening to this podcast that it certainly is in the detail these days more than ever. So hopefully Jeremy will give you a little bit of a crystal ball of where he sees the market heading on that interview with Jeremy later.
Yeah, and as well as catching up with Jeremy, we recorded the next in our series of supplier specials, which should be in your podcast feed at the beginning of next week. So do look out for that, because it's a fascinating insight.
Yeah, and just before we update you on something that hopefully, and I think it's been well received. I mean, last week you would have had the pleasure of listening to Ian Godbold in the new snippet of top tips. That Ian will be joining us once a month with his top tips for the industry, alongside once a month again with Stephen Whitten, the guru around mental wealth in the Men Able moments. And I think we said last time that if you do have anything that you want Ian to look at in those top tip sessions, then do drop us a note on our social channels to myself or Curtis. And to be honest with you, if you want Steve to talk about anything in particular around mental health, mental wealth, well-being, etc., then again, do the same. Drop Steve a note on his social network, particularly through LinkedIn, or drop a note to Curtis and I, and we'll certainly mention it to them and maybe get them to talk about certain topics that you as the listener want them to talk about.
Yeah, and we've got some good and bad news next. The bad news is that unfortunately, Auto Retail Network has ceased publication, and many listeners will be aware of the work they've been doing, certainly over the last 20 or so years, in terms of providing top line analysis and information, as well as a regular news service. So the bad news is that unfortunately it has closed, but the good news is that Tristan Young, the editorial mastermind behind Auto Retail Network, is continuing with his own publication called Auto Sunday, which starts this weekend, and that'll be going out every Sunday.
Yeah, so there's been communication gone around. If you've not seen it on social media, we'll also put a link on the newsletter on Monday where you can subscribe to receive the Auto Sunday, and they're also doing something called the Auto Market Insight as well. So again, I mean, it's great. You've known Tristan for many years, as I have, and he's a great writer into, as well as being a great person to know.
And Tristan's actually launching Auto Sunday with a free subscription offer. So do check him out on LinkedIn to find out how you can subscribe for that.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from AM Car Dealer, Motor Trader and The Guardian, starting with Lookers appoints former UK VW Group and Nissan boss as its new chair. We have the first acquisition of the year as West Riding Group acquires Bolton Car Centre. Car dealers are preferred to private sales for buyers selling their existing vehicles, according to new consumer research from Motors. UK car production in 2024 fell to its lowest level since 1954, reports the SMMT. And have the high-profile antics of Elon Musk turned off would-be UK Tesla buyers?
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
And as I said right at the start there, before we look at today's headline that Curtis has just gone through there, here's an extract from the fantastic interview there with Jeremy Yea from Cap HPI talking about January's used car trade values. As always, before we start and we clear up an industry myth that trade values go up in January, what your view of that movement into the month of January from December and then now as we move forward?
Well, the book dropped. Live movements dropped just 0.1% overall from start to finish. So January's live values into February monthly product, and the average movement is a 0.2 drop. It is a myth. I think people believe that values generally go up in January. They don't. They tend to go up through February's live movements leading into March book. And that's when we see, some more activity towards the back end of January and definitely into February. And that's been a similar case this year. It's been a good start, I would say, to January, but it didn't really come out of the blocks flying. I think it's been as we probably thought it would be, and as predicted, it would take maybe 2 or 3 weeks to really get going. And I think we're just seeing the signs of that now.
And what were the actual figures for the January movement as we move into February, and what did the month feel like, as you say there, start a little bit slow to start, but how does it compare to previous Januaries?
Yeah, so down 0.1 of £60 at 3 years, 60. As I said, the average movement is down 0.2 over the course of the years. If you look at historically, in terms of previous moves, last year was exactly the same, down 0.1. In 2023, it went up 0.1. And in 2022, it was flat. So these last 4 years have been very, very close to each other in terms of, the overall movement. If you go back pre-COVID times, the downward movements from January to February have actually been a little bit stronger. So in 2019, I think, where a lot of people compare against in terms of a normal seasonality or more normal year before, the world changed beyond recognition, that went down 0.7. So, yeah, we've seen definitely a period of stability through the last few years, and this didn't feel any different to, like I said, the last 4 years.
And you say that that point of big starts the year, but I think you were just alluding to there that the month kind of slowly progressed as we went through the month of January, because you're looking at this from a day-to-day basis as the value and the market starts to wake up through the month of January.
Absolutely, yeah. We're looking at it on a daily basis and looking at many cycles of vehicles per day. There was some positivity for some areas and there was some negativity in others, but overall, it just gradually got, it was sort of steady, I would say. I think it dropped zero point 0.1 at the beginning of January and was almost 0.1 all the way through. It did drop to 0.2, but then recovered back to 0.1 again. So very little movement in terms of the overall movement, but lots and lots of moving parts and very mixed picture within the detail. But, as we say every month, that's always, the devil's always in the detail.
Well, as always, it's great to catch up with Jeremy. I think he's had a busy time getting into the new year, everything going on and getting that sort of first of the editorials out. But great insight there and a chat with Jeremy as usual, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And as he points out, it's a marginal drop for the month. And he does actually clarify about it is a bit of a myth that values go up in January, because the stats that he talked to us about, sort of going back a number of years now, show that values do tend to just drop a little in January. They don't tend to go up. It's one of those urban myths in the industry.
It is, yeah. And as I said right at the start there, if you haven't listened to the full interview that was shared on Thursday morning, then please do check your podcast feed and have a full listen to that interview with Jeremy Yea. Obviously, we do talk about EVs. We can't have the conversation with Jeremy without talking about the EV market. But I think what he has to say and his view of the way he sees the market, particularly as we go into February and March, is worth listening to. So do have a listen back to that full interview there with Jeremy.
So first headline this week comes from AM Online, and it is Lookers appoints former VW Group UK boss as new chair. So this is the news that Global Auto Holdings, who acquired Lookers in September 2023 as Canadian business, has appointed Alex Smith as its new chair as part of its wider European expansion plans. Now, it is worth looking at this story because it is very detailed, and it does shed some light on Global's plans for Lookers, both in the UK and some of its European businesses as well.
Yeah, definitely. And if you remember, not a few years ago, we were talking a lot about Lookers for the wrong reasons, weren't we? Some of the challenges they were facing and restructuring. I mean, obviously now, since that acquisition and since the appointment of James Brealey as managing director, they've gone through a lot of change, and there's a lot more to come there. But before we get on to that, because there is a lovely little list of some of the sort of the changes in terms of that personnel changes within this story. But Alex Smith has got a fantastic, fascinating background, hasn't he, in terms of his career.
I mean, his CV is incredible, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Alex a number of times over the years and interviewing him. But he actually started in the industry as a Ford graduate back in 1995. And from there, he worked in sales and marketing and network development for Daewoo. Remember them, Phil? There's a name from the past.
Yeah.
After Daewoo, he moved to Kia as commercial director, and he joined the Volkswagen Group in 2007 as head of group parts operations, and eventually becoming director of passenger cars. And from there, he moved to Nissan in 2016 as managing director, before returning to the VW Group in 2019 as group managing director. So vast, huge experience there in the OEM world, and brings a lot of experience to this new position for him as chair of the Lookers.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a structure that they've needed in terms of their acquisition in Europe of last year with that logistics business, Boone. The import and logistics operation over there. Obviously, the acquisition of Lookers, the work that James Brealey and the work he's doing there, and his sort of new executive team and structure that he's changing there within Lookers. So Alex is coming as more of that strategic level viewpoint to connect the business together a little bit more seamlessly than it may have done previously. So it's a great appointment there, and there is a list there at the end there, sort of saying, obviously with Alex Smith, who's been appointed as chair, James Brealey, we just mentioned there, down as the managing director. You've got Owen McClellan, who's the new chief financial officer, who's formerly managing director of a company, Shop Group, and done 10 years in terms of that tenure at UK retail and Morrison's. You've got Duncan Gray, former information officer from the House of Fraser. You've got Chris Whitaker. Stop me any time on this one you want, Curtis, if you like.
No, you're doing well. You're doing well.
Chief People Officer. He joined Lookers in 2020. And then you're down to Ona Cassidy, who's the General Counsel there at Lookers, who joined in 2022. So you can see now, and there's more to come on, I think. So they're starting to get that whole structure, that executive team within Lookers. And I'm sure that when we start to see some of the financial announcements in due course, we'll start to see what impact that's had on the performance and structure of the business going forward. So wish these guys all the best of luck with this. It's a good opportunity, and I suspect we might start to see some acquisitions and some structural movements within that business going forward.
Yeah, definitely one to watch. And the next headline comes from Motor Trader. And as I said at the top of the show, it's the first acquisition of the year that we've heard of. And it's West Riding acquires Bolton Car Centre. So this is West Riding Group has acquired Bolton Car Centre, which is based in Bury. And this will bring its total of Hyundai showrooms to 4, because it's got existing sites in Bolton, Colne and Salford. So really consolidating its interest and representation with Hyundai. It is a Solus Hyundai group. So this acquisition makes perfect sense.
So I always enjoy it when we start talking about northern businesses with yourself, Curtis. As you do when we talk about southern business, and I don't know the areas. No, I think for those listening that are a bit further north than Curtis, that's BCC in Bury and Bolton and Salford. If you come from the Lancashire area of the country. So again, a great. I mean, I know these businesses obviously in terms of my area up here, but BCC, great business, great there. But I think this is more that, if you remember back, Curtis, when we did a podcast last year and talked about Hyundai and their growth plans and their future and partnership plans, and you can start to see it now where these single sites are now moving into sort of multi-site purchases now, aren't they? Becoming a little bit sort of soulless representation of a number of Hyundai operations now, and you can see this slowly starting to play through.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you said Hyundai.
Yes, I corrected myself on that one. Yes.
No, you're absolutely right. And within the story, it does actually say that, do we have to call it Hyundai? It just doesn't sound right, does it? But Hyundai, let's go for Hyundai. It is actually growing its number of showrooms across the UK, but the sites are operated by a smaller number of partners. And it is all part of this consolidation that's going on in terms of representation. And within the piece, it does actually quote Ashley Andrew, who is the president of Hyundai Motor UK, who says the West Riding Group's expansion in Greater Manchester exemplifies exactly what we're trying to achieve with our network evolution strategy. They have consistently demonstrated their ability to deliver the premium experience our customers expect, and this acquisition will help us serve one of our key market areas. So that really does sum up the strategic fit here of this acquisition.
Yeah, and they finish off talking about obviously new product like the Ioniq 9 that's forthcoming, and obviously this now as the brand starts to look at the future, and they're getting those partners in to support them and partner with them for that future.
We'll be back after the break with the rest of this week's headlines.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are, on your podcast feed.
So heading over to Car Dealer magazine now, and this is that car dealers are preferred to private sales for buyers selling their existing vehicles. And this is from the consumer survey study into your panel, motor panel into at Motors there. So this is that over half of buyers say that they will sell their existing car to a dealer rather than arrange a private sale. And the study by Motors also reveals that buyers are prepared to travel up to 50 miles to buy their right car. And experts say findings show that positive news for dealers making stocking decisions. So this is, again, lots of insight from the consumer study there from Motors, but positive news for the dealers.
Yeah, definitely. And I did work with the team at Motors on this, so I have seen the research. So, as you say, it is the Consumer Insight Panel, and it is a mega piece of research, and there's lots more to come out from this over the coming weeks. But what they've done is it's independently researched, and it's a study of 2,000 car buyers. And within this report, it found that just over half, so 52%, said their preference would be to sell their existing car to a dealer, followed by private sales at 23% and specialist car buying services at 12%. So really highlighting the importance of dealers in the part exchange, the trade-in part of the car buying journey. And the car dealer piece actually points out that the news will no doubt come as music to the ears of the motor trade as ongoing stock issues continue to dog the used car industry. So, yeah, and this is very much a reflection of sort of changing attitudes, I think, within the used car industry or certainly the franchise sector over recent years, and more value attached to those trade-ins to be retailed rather than to be auctioned off. Elsewhere, the survey found that nearly half of car buyers, so that's 47%, are looking to buy within the next 12 months. And that's actually an increase on the 40% who plan to do so when last asked in September. So some encouraging news there for in terms of car buying intent.
No, exactly, yeah, and as we mentioned there at the start, in terms of distance travelled, that the Consumer Insight Panel did identify that an average buyer are prepared to travel between 40 and 50 miles to find the right car at the right price, with more than likely to travel 47 miles than with men more likely to travel further 47 miles than women 40 miles. That's an interesting result there, Curtis. I don't know what would drive that 7-mile difference between the men and women travelling, but
well, maybe the men just get lost because they're not going to ask for directions.
Maybe it's the same location, maybe it's the same thing, but you just go around it a slightly longer way. Maybe that's
exactly. Yeah,
but it does obviously also saying that buyers living in Scotland and the southwest of England are prepared to travel the furthest at 50 miles. According to the data as well. So again, some great insight here into the consumer behaviours.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to the next headline, it's from The Guardian, and it's UK car production falls to lowest level since 1954. So this is the SMMT data and stats on UK car production from last year, and it revealed that production fell to 780,000 units during the year. And as I say, that's the lowest level since 1954, apart from the pandemic years when factories were forced to close, and then the supply chain problems caused computer chip shortages. So taking that out of the equation, it's the lowest level for that's 70 years, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I think they do talk about, obviously, the challenges around the global production, the challenges facing that semiconductor shortage that we all know about and remember. But obviously, they do cite that the UK was at one point the powerhouse of automotive manufacturing, wasn't it? And they're now facing these these challenges around sort of, international global investment in the UK. We've talked on the podcast around Stellantis moving out of Luton, the transition to commercial vehicles from cars. There's things going on with Mini, and obviously we know about Jaguar's challenges around their production, and it's all impacting on this UK manufacturing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So it's for all the reasons you cite there, plus the switch to electric production, which meant that manufacturers weren't producing as many cars as they typically would. So, bit of a perfect storm going on last year. So, yeah, we are hoping, of course, that it does pick up again this year, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, it does finish off in the story saying that that's a far cry from the 2 million production target set as recently as 2017. Saying since then, years of political uncertainty caused by the Brexit vote and the pandemic have contributed to the closure of several plants. Stellantis shocked the industry again in November 2023 with the plant closed of its van factory in Luton there. So again, we've been through these challenges, and hopefully we'll get that turned around when the UK government announced their industrial strategy plan for the UK. We'll move on from politics and we'll move on to our final story here, Curtis. So heading back to car dealer, and this is that Brits turned off from Tesla because of Elon Musk's new research finds. So this is the new survey shows that Elon Musk is putting off Brits buying Tesla products. Electrifying.com quizzed 1,000 people earlier this month, and that the findings also showed a rise in appeal of Chinese brands. So this is interesting, this one, isn't it? I mean, it's a fascinating story to read.
Yeah, and it's based on research that was conducted by electrifying.com, which is the EV car buying advice website. And they quizzed 1,000 people last month, January, and found that nearly 2/3 of car buyers are put off from buying a Tesla because of the controversial CEO. That's very much UK. I suspect it's probably different in the US. I should imagine sales have gone up in
Possibly,
the US.
yeah,
For
possibly.
the same reasons.
We won't bring Europe into this, because that is getting back into political conversation if we bring Europe into this conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
So
These respondents, they were current EV owners. So, it is interesting because it's really asking them what they'll do next, and whether they'll buy Tesla, whether they'll buy something else. And those intending to purchase, 59% of the group saying that Musk's influence would deter them from going for a Tesla. And the survey also highlighted the growing appeal of the Chinese brands that we talk about most weeks on the podcast. And it found that among EV owners, 61% would be happy choosing a car from a Chinese manufacturer, while 56% of potential EV buyers would also go Chinese. So, we're seeing some indicators here that the increasing strength of the Chinese brands and less appeal of Tesla, and how much of that is connected to the antics of Elon Musk is anyone's guess, but I'm suspecting it will start to have an impact.
There will be. What I mean, there's probably various other things with this. Basically choice. I mean, Elon and Tesla, should we say, has led that EV sector for some time. Now with the BYDs, the Geelys, with the Motor and the JQs, your Great Walls, Sepang, Neo, Xiaomi on the horizon, you name it. There's and your legacy brands. I mean, we were just talking earlier about Hyundai and the Ioniq 9 and things like this. So the market in that EV space is significantly changing, and consumers and drivers and benefiting kind company drivers, they've got choice now in that EV space. So there is an element that dominance of Tesla has shifted. But it's becoming a very competitive marketplace there, and Ginny Buckley, who's a journalist, did comment on this, and she's also one of the founders of electrifying.com that research reveals a major shift in consumer perceptions, and saying that Tesla has played a pivotal role in accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles. But their findings show that Elon Musk's personal involvement in Tesla's brand appears to be polarizing, pushing many buyers to look elsewhere. But obviously saying that the research does also highlight that how fiercely competitive and fast-moving the EV market has become, which is right. I mean, it's not the market that Elon dominated with Tesla for such a long time.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, on a month-on-month basis, it's going to be interesting this year, particularly to just track Tesla's sales, because, as you say, they were a dominant force. We've had the Chinese brands coming in, pretty much stealing their lunch, and compounded with that, the sort of off-message remarks made by Elon Musk on pretty much anything he wants to comment on. So, bit of a cauldron going on there, I think.
I think he'll be all right. I mean, there's a lot of focus now on AI, his SpaceX, his robotic business, and full self-drive, his FSD capabilities that he's developing. So again, not one we'll feel too sorry about, but under a little bit of threat when it comes to that dominance within that EV marketplace. But hopefully we've done a good roundup of some of the activities that's been happening in this the final week of the month of January, the first month of 2025. Lots going on. Let's say, do listen out next week for the supplier special podcast. We'll leave that as a bit of a surprise for the minute. We'll keep you out for that one. Do head back to your podcast feed, and if you've not listened to the full interview there with Jeremy Yea, then please do so. And as Curtis pointed out right at the start of today's podcast, we will add a link to Tristan's new venture in Auto Sunday, where you can get that initial free subscription for the first month. And I'm sure we'll mention some of the stories on there when we start to get them. But wish those guys the best of luck with that new venture.
Yeah, definitely. But that's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.